The worried man leaned towards the princess and begged her to hold on, trying to make sure she was okay, while Hayo looked exhausted and worn out. That night, loud bangs echoed throughout the castle, and the maid became alarmed when she saw a girl tumble down the stairs, after which someone quickly asked if she was the princess. The bespectacled man calmly informed the seated employee that he didn't have to come to work tomorrow, speaking with unwavering seriousness in the empty office. At his desk, one employee explained to a colleague standing across from him that management was preparing layoffs due to a budget failure caused by someone's constant mistakes, which caused the colleague to look silently surprised. The person being addressed clenched his fist, feeling helpless and guilty, at a loss for words as he was politely asked to resign for the good of the company. The man recalled how, by his mid-40s, he found himself in a dead-end job, working overtime without pay, enduring ridicule for his elite education, unable to find a new position, and ultimately landing a job at a dubious company. He sat on the bench, feeling despair and wondering why fate was so unfair to him, until his gaze fell on a beautiful stone on the ground that looked like a jewel, not glass. Then he began to think that maybe somewhere in another world he could start all over again, dreaming of breaking away from his old life and becoming a completely different person. A sudden flash of light blinded him, and he reflexively covered his eyes, shocked and disoriented by the sudden radiance. The man recoiled, amazed by the glowing crystal hovering nearby, and chuckled to himself, realizing that his desire to change his life had sounded too vague. He shook his head, feeling like he was losing his mind as he contemplated the forbidden idea of recreating a living person from scratch using the spirit god stone. Then he declared to himself with ardent determination that he would be willing to become anyone, just to start all over again, because the life he had lived could not be more unhappy. He was silent for a while, and then admitted that sending his soul into the next incarnation was not a bad idea, although it was questionable, since no one would know him there. The man knelt before the shining stone and prayed to it for action, after which it burst into a blinding light, as if answering the call. At that very moment, an ominous voice rang out, threatening to kill, and the girl with long pink hair sharply inhaled, feeling a wave of horror. Then she remembered everything, how she died and how her soul was sent to another world, while clutching her head in pain, as if trying to hold on to the memories. The dark-haired girl's eyes widened, and the maid, Mimi, rushed to hug her, glad that her mistress had woken up, and reproaching herself for not having looked after her condition properly. The blonde girl looked in the mirror, and a voice nearby reminded her that yesterday she turned 8 years old and fell down the stairs after spending the whole day in bed. Then she grabbed the one standing next to her and exclaimed in surprise about the number 8 and about the princess, noticing her fangs and trembling tail. Meanwhile, the dark-haired maid tried to calm her down, explaining that they were in one of the bedrooms of the castle belonging to the demon lord, and the pink-haired girl was.
I would be very happy if you subscribed to the channel, liked and wrote a comment, rating this manga on a scale from 1 to 10. Your opinion is very important to me. This will help me better understand what my audience is interested in, because you are really important to me.
Perplexed about what was happening to her body and mind. A sudden gust of wind blew through the window as the maid hesitantly confirmed that beyond the walls was indeed the demon lord's castle, towering over the entire property. Late at night, a huge castle stood under the moonlight, and a maid calmly explained to the stunned girl that the land belonged to Petalata, the fifth domain of Salamatia, the land of demons. Then the girl realized that the figure hovering in the sky was none other than the demon lord himself, who had come to make sure that she was alive after the incident. A girl with pointed, almost elven ears in a maid's outfit looked out of the window, noticing that while someone was sleeping last night, something extremely important happened. The girl with long pink hair said that the demon lord's 5 children, including herself, would soon begin a battle for the right to inherit the throne. Meanwhile, she mentally recalled how she once said that she was ready to become anything, but now she realized that being a princess of the demon world was too hard for the middle-aged former office worker, while 2 maids adjusted her dress and crown. After Mimi's explanation and the memories that came back, the girl in the crown finally realized the situation she was in, and the maid stood behind her, waiting for further instructions. The story then moved to a land inhabited by demons and monsters, where the maid told that the demon lord's youngest daughter, an 8-year-old girl, was caught up in a war for the throne. The man in glasses, watching everything that was happening, thought with irony that this was still better than selling goods in a hopeless, black company, and the fair-haired girl next to him blushed slightly, but listened attentively. The girl with wavy hair smirked when the maid remarked that it wasn't every day that one got the chance to walk the royal path and become part of the nobility, emphasizing the rarity of the moment. At that very moment, the girl flinched as a huge, flaming wolf with two heads named Orphos appeared in front of her, causing the boy behind her to cry out in fear. The dark skeletal bird said that the child was too weak to be of royal blood, while the pink-haired girl with shining wings realized who was in front of her, the demon lord himself. The sinister figure from the shadows declared that if she lost, she would forfeit her right to the throne and become prey for the hounds of hell, adding that it would be up to him to decide whether her youth or inexperience made her unworthy of competing with her siblings. In a panic, the girl held out a small object and shouted to Mimi, when a deafening roar was heard nearby, causing the maid to flinch. Then another dark-haired woman calmly explained to the stunned girl that all this time she had been protecting her magical core, which allowed her to use powers in this world. The girl, in desperation, ordered her to act immediately and grabbed her hand tightly, explaining that she had to do this in order to activate her own magic. The crowned princess frantically tried to remember the spells, while the maid demanded that she drink her blood, losing patience from haste and fear. The pink-haired girl froze when the dark-haired girl explained that her power was awakened by absorbing other people's abilities through blood, and the latter, in horror, denied, refusing to accept such methods. A voice came from the darkness, claiming that by absorbing the blood and energy of others, one could unlock true magical power, and a demon-like creature with horns listened carefully to the words. In the end, with a swift movement, Lilith decisively declared that she would use her blood and Leviathan's mana to help the princess recover, but she fiercely objected, not wanting to resort to such a barbaric method. Rayla gave a sharp warning and shielded the princess from a powerful blow that pierced the wall behind them, causing shards of stone to fly across the room and hit the floor. The servant, breathing heavily, rushed to her and asked if she was wounded, to which the girl confidently replied that she was fine, although she was trembling inside. Then he swore to protect her even at the cost of his own life. The princess was tossing and turning inside out, blaming herself for her stupidity and thinking that if she ran away, Mimi would take away her right to the throne, although her heart desperately yearned to run away. The girl with white hair and a demonic aura fought with herself, not wanting to give up after being reborn, and a two-headed wolf appeared from the shadows nearby. Then a quiet voice uttered a reflection on the changes of the soul. The wounded woman begged the princess to stop, but she cold-bloodedly cut off her injured hand and thought that her own death might also have been in vain. The girl swallowed nervously, clutching her wrist tightly, then resolutely said that she had to drink the blood, and promised to do it despite her fear. The next moment, one sank her teeth into the other's hand, causing her to cry out in pain, after which both were breathing heavily, one from the tension, the other from the feeling of someone else's strength, slowly drawing in blood. The girl with long hair felt sparks fly around her and the man standing behind her screamed as he saw blood dripping down the floor while she started crying from the strain. Wounded but unbroken, Mana straightened up, assuring that she was fine, and at that moment two smoky monsters with double heads rose from the cracks in the ground in front of her, growling threateningly. Meanwhile, in another place, two men were discussing a deal, and one warned the other not to look down on him, confidently pointing his hand forward as if he were making a fateful pact. The princess firmly told herself that she would not run anymore, determined to change and prove that she was not useless, while the maid watched in surprise, and dark creatures approached from the shadows. The pink-haired girl fell abruptly, feeling her body remembering magical movements that she had never learned, and a two-headed wolf was already growling nearby, ready to pounce. Then she shouted for the blood to lead the way and ordered everyone to retreat, releasing a blinding stream of flame that crashed down on the wolves, setting the air around them on fire. Lilith unleashed a powerful blast, and the blazing beam struck the monstrous wolf, pinning it to the ground with ice, while the two girls in the back watched in stupefaction, not believing that it was defeated. Tears rolled down the face of the maid, who whispered that the princess had become magnificent, and the princess herself stood alone under the night sky, illuminated by the soft light of the moon, while a bird flew overhead. The crowned girl staggered, realizing that her magic was indeed befitting of the heir to the throne, but almost fell, causing the maids to exclaim in alarm. A sudden splash in the water made one of them scream, and the princess turned towards the source of the sound, realizing that something had happened in the garden. Two maids were discussing in a panic that their strength was running out, but they needed to save someone at the pond, after which the story moved to the pond itself under the full moon, where the passage between the worlds was hidden. Rayla, leaning on her broom, watched as the two girls excitedly asked the hero if he was going on a journey to defeat the demon lord, but he calmly refused. The young man sighed tiredly by the water under the moon, dreaming of being an ordinary carefree child, until a shadow nearby warned the children playing nearby to quickly return to the city, where it would be safer. Astra spun around, noticing movement in the water, and at the same moment Lilith began to thrash as her leg became trapped under a snag. She choked and coughed until she was suddenly pulled out of the darkness by a spear. Both froze, stunned by what had happened, realizing that before them was not just a meeting, but a clash of two worlds, a man and a demon. Under the glow of the full moon, a young man stood with a long spear, and from its shaft hung a girl with cat ears, upside down. That's how their story began. The story follows the daughter of a demon lord, whose destiny is to suffer, and a human hero bound to her by fate, while an old man watches in the shadows, preparing the ground for a rebellion against the faithful. A girl was struggling in the water, and nearby, a young man fishing lost his footing and fell into the pond with a splash, while a voiceover reflected on finding a place where one could truly belong. Rayla reached out and grabbed Celeste's hand tightly, declaring that she was willing to do anything, even if it meant destroying the entire world, just to keep her safe. Astra was perplexed as to why the man was saving her, while the young man, lighting a fire, assured her that it would soon become warmer and asked her to hold on with all her might. The girl noticed with surprise that there was no castle or demons around, as if reality itself had changed, and she found herself in another world, where a full moon shone over a quiet lake. Meanwhile, the boy began to wonder if the appearance of people nearby could mean something more, and his thoughts involuntarily returned to a familiar face from the past. According to Hayo's memories, this world is divided. Demons live on one side, and humans on the other, and between them lies an invisible but insurmountable border. The girl tried to comprehend how she ended up on this side, and the narrator noted that mirrors, expanses of water, and the full moon are capable of connecting different worlds, opening brief gates between them. The young man quietly said that he didn't know why the man had kidnapped her, but that he needed to find a way to escape, and the girl anxiously asked where he was taking her. Then they remembered the guardhouse by the passage where the guards spend the night, and she begged him to take her there before she caught a cold, to which he jokingly replied that he was not going to eat her. The girl asked doubtfully if it was okay to entrust the protection of the world to a child, and the boy suggested that perhaps the city was short of people, but added with a smile that he became a guardian because he was the strongest. He finally introduced himself as Ernest, the hero of humanity, explaining that he had become a gatekeeper only because no one else wanted to take on the burden, which surprised his interlocutor. The girl with horns suddenly realized that if there was a demon lord, then humans should have their own hero, while the man calmly played a role-playing game, and the princess in the crown whispered fearfully that they would be killed. The blonde girl then introduced herself as Hayo, denying her royal origins, claiming that she was a simple girl despite the luxurious robe and crown. Rayla gently assured her that she would not harm her, whoever she was, and admitted that she never sought to fight the demons or their lord as they both caught their breath. After a short respite, the young man with the spear announced that they had arrived, and a small stone house appeared ahead, hidden among the dense forest. Rayla and the girl entered an old, dilapidated room. The girl noted with disgust how terrible everything looked, and Rayla told her not to worry, promising to make a fire, while a bat nearby in the dim light whispered princess to her. The young man calmly explained that only members of the royal family were capable of subjugating lesser demons, reminding her how he had previously called her a princess and adding that this proved her origin, while she silently looked away. A girl with long pink hair tried in vain to silence a squeaking toy, while a cat standing nearby lazily noted that she now had a guide and a conductor through the gate that would not allow her to get wet. The princess thoughtfully noted that the young man, despite his title of hero, showed no hostility towards demons, and he himself sat quietly on a bench nearby, immersed in his thoughts. Meanwhile, Lilith was wondering if it was possible to use one of the people as a pawn, and Dragos was examining the old flint, deciding that the guy was either naive or too kind, since the locals seemed to be using him without a twinge of conscience. The young man hesitated briefly, but then agreed to use magic, and a little girl nearby explained that his power was definitely of a heroic level. He did not need any formulas or spells. The pink-haired girl sheepishly admitted that she had exhausted all her energy and had accidentally fallen into the human world, and the boy, shocked by her confession, suddenly realized that he was eager to obtain the hero's mana, but stopped at the last moment. The girl with the small crown guessed that the vampire in front of her was exhausted and nervous, and it was precisely because of the lack of mana and strength that her behavior was so abrupt. The young man extended his hand, offering her his blood, and the tiny figure in the gothic dress accepted without hesitation, while the other girl carefully opened the door, watching what was happening in surprise. The vampire tried to explain something awkwardly, but the young man gently asked what was wrong and quietly asked her to come closer so he could help without fear or unnecessary words. The girl trembled, remembering a painful experience from the past and afraid of experiencing the same thing again, while two tiny shadows nearby quietly whispered words of encouragement. Raylo patiently allowed her to continue for the sake of transferring the hero's mana, while Lilith, angry, resented being treated like a child, imagining that he was holding her in his arms, and indignantly pushed the thought away. Reno flinched as the girl suddenly sank her teeth into his neck, and then silently endured, feeling her breathing deepen until suddenly his eye flew open with a surge of inner strength. Rayla felt the mana of exceptional quality emanate from his body and noted its refined taste with mild admiration, while Reno wearily asked if she was finally finished. Celeste thanked him for his full restoration, and then offered to direct the remaining energy to her, causing the young man to look at her with slight surprise and think about her request. The girl explained to a young man named Rene that in the demonic lands the children of the Overlord were fighting for the inheritance of the throne, and he, smiling slightly, said that they could simply call him Rene. The boy admitted that his magic was still weak and depended on the support of others, while the younger girl, crossing her arms, declared that even though she was the youngest, she did not intend to give in. The girl with short hair fervently asked the hero to share his power, calling him a savior and assuring that without him they would not win this battle. The girl recoiled, stunned by the words, and the young man, sitting down on a bench, said that he was afraid of meeting the demons under the power of her brothers and sisters. Rayla replied with irritation that she had no intention of being the hero destined to kill the demon lord, as she was tired of the townspeople forcing that role on her entire life. The girl looked at him in surprise when he calmly said that he did not hate demons, because the destruction of their lord would upset the balance of the world and leave many people without work, dependent on the existence of darkness. The young man sat quietly by the fireplace, watching the flickering firelight, and reflected that no one thought about the consequences of their decisions. He didn't want anyone to determine his fate but himself. Then he confessed that he no longer wanted to be a hero, tired of others' expectations and the weight of the legend they forced upon him. The girl next to him froze in disbelief, unable to understand how he could turn his back on his destiny. Rayla raised her head and passionately declared that she dreamed of a world where demons and humans could coexist without destroying each other. She added that she wanted to achieve this through her own efforts, without relying on fate or ancient prophecies. The young woman angrily accused the young man, saying that not everyone can choose their own future, as such a luxury is only available to those protected by their surroundings. Her voice trembled, and he stood silent, stunned and confused. After a short pause, she sharply rejected his words, saying that these were not dreams, but pathetic excuses behind which he was hiding in order to avoid fighting the demon lord. The girl in the crown turned her back on him and said quietly that no matter what he wanted to become, he couldn't change who he was born to be. He lowered his gaze, leaning against the cold wall, and she exhaled with irritation and weariness. Somewhere in my memory, I heard the voice of a man who rudely called someone a disgrace to the family and reminded me of a failed education, like a scar that would never heal. A scene flashed before her eyes. The girl was standing in the office, listening to her boss say with icy calm that running away was useless, because the system required discipline, while her colleagues behind her back only smirked. Through her tears, she whispered that she felt the same pain as before, and the young man calmly replied that the desire to follow a dream did not mean that he was running away from his responsibilities. He reasoned that it is impossible to know whether you are doing the right thing until you try it yourself, and only after falls and mistakes can you understand whether it was worth it. Then Rayla asked Hayo what she would achieve by becoming the demon lord, and Hayo, looking at the floor in embarrassment, admitted that she didn't know, was trying to change, but was still searching for her purpose. The girl thought she couldn't openly oppose Rene, who spoke of his goals with such sincere determination. At that moment, a sudden explosion shattered the silence, causing the water beneath the moon to tremble. Reno grabbed someone's hand sharply, demanding that they go to the city immediately, and the girl was indignant that he was not listening to her objections, and, cursing angrily, ran after him. That same night, a monster with dozens of eyes appeared in the square, and the residents ran away in panic, while the young man assured them that he could protect them, even if it was madness. Then, strange creatures with eyes on tentacles appeared from the darkness, declaring themselves opponents, and the young man prepared for battle, not believing that he was facing something like this. After a powerful explosion scattered the creatures, a brave girl rushed forward, declaring that as the daughter of a demon, she was obliged to fight to the end, and urged everyone to focus on the future. The next second, the warrior made a swift thrust with his spear, breaking through the enemy's barrier, and fearlessness was visible in his gaze as a fiery light illuminated the battlefield. The girl screamed that a new wave of shadows was approaching him, and the young man instantly turned and took a stance, preparing to meet the approaching evil. Rayla refused to back down, declaring that she now had the power of a hero and charged at her enemy with a furious cry, while the tiny bat frantically tugged at her cloak, as if trying to stop her. At that moment, the horned girl turned around at the sudden roar behind her and saw a short-haired man calmly watching the creature hovering above them, its shrill echoes piercing the night. Rayla ran up to Lilith and, seeing the blood, sank down next to her, worried. The girl looked up with difficulty, remembering how the uncontrollable surge of mana had thrown her to the ground and left a deep wound. Meanwhile, the young warrior furiously berated the culprit, demanding an explanation for why she had tortured the child. She apologized haltingly, insisting it was an accident, but his gaze only intensified the oppressive tension. Then the warrior, gritting his teeth, raised his weapon and brought it down with all his might on the swirling, multi-eyed shadows. Sparks of mana ran along the blade as he stepped forward, refusing to let fear take hold. With a battle cry, Rayla launched a mighty thrust, piercing a path through the darkness. His blade flared with energy and cleaved the enormous, monstrous figure, the impact shaking the earth. A bright flash illuminated everything around, and a moment later, silence fell. The girl breathed a sigh of relief when the young man next to her said that she and the city were now safe. Astra leaned over and asked if she was hurt, but she looked down and replied that she was fine, she was just useless. He then gently wiped the dust from her cheek and extended his hand, helping her up. Reynad ordered Celeste to warn the villagers to take cover, but an alarming rustling sound came from far away. Soon, an angry man attacked Ernest, accusing him of being absent during the attack, stunning Celeste. Rayla angrily accused his interlocutor of not destroying the demon lord immediately, claiming that the city would have suffered if he had delayed. Someone in the crowd then noticed that Rayla had just saved everyone and didn't understand what he was talking about. The wounded boy quietly said that he did not want to be a hero and let others decide for him, and the determined girl objected that it was his duty, because the fight between people and demons still continues. Then she defiantly declared that she would no longer exhaust herself for the sake of other people's expectations. Her words made the man behind her flinch, and the young man next to her looked up in surprise. The girl angrily poked Renee in the chest, accusing him and the others of merely hiding and watching instead of acting. She called them adults acting like children, feeling awkwardly ashamed for everyone. The young man looked at her in confusion, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple, and asked what was going on. At that moment, a firm statement about the decision was heard off-screen. The girl passionately proclaimed that, having become the demon lord, she would create a world without wars, where no one could complain about fate, and the young man standing behind her listened to her calmly, with slight admiration. Rayla quietly warned them to be on guard while two men nearby argued over whether the madman should be kept away from the city. The crowned girl and the young man stood in the shadows, eavesdropping on their conversation. Rayla gently told Celeste that she would no longer have to fight alone, and she thanked him, acknowledging that he was the first one to stand up for her, promising to repay him with kindness if his words were sincere. Meanwhile, in another place, a young man with a bandaged hand sat alone and acknowledged that he was completely alone, while another world flashed by off-screen, a dim room littered with papers and illuminated by the light of two monitors. The girl with short blonde hair flushed in surprise when someone gently stroked her head. She admitted it was the first time she'd heard such kind words, and her eyes flickered slightly with emotion. At the edge of the forest, another figure, a girl with long hair and a confident smile, leaned against a tree, watching from afar and noting that she was doing better than expected. The girl, her gaze blazing, repeated that she would create a world where everyone would be at peace, and then no one would dare complain. The boy behind her replied flatly that he himself would become the demon lord. At this moment, a maid quietly knocked on the castle door, greeting the princess and offering to help her change. Outside, under a gloomy sky, bats circled above the towers, heralding further changes. The girl confidently declared that she was completely ready, and the man standing next to her was surprised to note how much she had changed. She now looked majestic, although she usually behaved rather briskly and boyishly. A few days after returning home, the pink-haired heroine complained that she couldn't cope with her thick hair, so the red-haired woman offered to help, easily managing her hair while the young owner awkwardly got used to her body. The next morning, the girl enjoyed a delicious breakfast, reflecting on how comfortable her life had become. Soon, the maid detailed her busy schedule, classes in magic, imperial etiquette, horseback riding, music, and history. The girl with fish-like features happily told me that lately everyone had been praising the young lady, saying that she had become a different person, and even the teachers were not stingy with compliments. The heroine smiled and admitted that she finally understood the true value of learning and the pleasure of discovering new things. The man nearby watched silently, while another figure nearby expressed joyful surprise at her words. In the morning, arriving an hour before the lesson began, the princess thanked her teacher for her visit, to which she replied that she was looking forward to the upcoming lesson and asked if the student had eaten anything extra since she was so energetic. The girl thoughtfully noted that she was truly fascinated by magical disciplines and political sciences, something she had been deprived of in her previous life. Someone nearby was quietly reading a book, occasionally nodding at her words. During an etiquette lesson, the young princess performed a graceful curtsy with perfect balance, and the narrator emphasized that such grace was the result of long and rigorous training. Late in the evening, by the light of the moon, she insisted on pouring the maid's tea herself, but she refused, asking the servant to do it, noting that the mistress should not bother. Lilith, sitting at her desk, sighed wearily, noticing how quickly time was flying. She was glad to no longer have to jostle on crowded trains and decided to get some fresh air, as it was still far from bedtime. A girl with long hair stepped out onto the balcony, gazing at the snow-covered city and reflecting that this was the first time she'd seen her lands from such a height. Below, a quiet bridge stretched out, bathed in a silvery glow. The pink-haired princess walked down the night street, accompanied by a cloaked figure, remembering that it was this small land that was personally granted to her and became her first territory. She thought that the peaceful coexistence of demons and humans seemed much more difficult than the destruction of one of the sides, but her companion noted that demons were also part of the balance of this world. Lilith leaned wearily against the railing and exhaled heavily, admitting to herself that she remained the weakest of all the heirs, despite the hero's support. Someone nearby quietly uttered words of surprise. Rayla became wary when he spotted the demon nearby, but Lilith merely smirked, looking at him confidently. Then the horned girl, with a smirk, called him an old man and asked if thoughts of the past tormented him. The princess involuntarily tensed, realizing her identity might have been revealed. The man opposite her narrowed his eyes predatorily, openly declaring that he had come here to kill her. The girl with long hair suddenly startled the tiny creature, causing it to flinch, and then laughed cheerfully, apologizing and asking if it really didn't remember her. The pink-haired heroine looked up in surprise when someone calmly explained that the stone she had found earlier actually belonged to him. A girl with short dark hair cautiously asked the blonde if she really was just a fragment capable of speech. The blonde, looking down nervously, recalled how people had called her the god of the spirit stone when they found her in the park. After a pause, the blonde quietly said that she belonged neither to humans nor to demons, and at that moment her hair gently swayed in the air, as if obeying the invisible breath of the world. The confident girl introduced herself as Od, an alchemist and wielder of the Philosopher's Stone. Her smile shone under the starry sky, reflected in the blue light of the stone, which shimmered softly in her palm. The woman with long dark hair calmly explained that she was immortal, traveled between worlds, and played the role of a deity here. The girl with the crown listened silently, stunned by the confession. The princess was surprised to learn that the Philosopher's Stone could be blue, not red. Od, looking at her gently, explained that they came from different worlds and advised her not to be afraid to absorb the power completely. Then Lilith suggested exploring the city, now that they'd arrived, and the bat-winged girl blinked in surprise. Meanwhile, Reina, playfully nudging her older companion, told him to hurry up and get ready for the walk. On a crowded street, where bats circled the square, stood a girl with half-black, half-white hair. She noted how alive everything looked, looking at the little girl with the crown huddled nearby. With a slight smile, the woman explained that Petilad was a remote but cozy place with a 19th-century atmosphere. The girl hung on every word and couldn't help but let out a surprised sigh. The princess enthusiastically compared the mana-powered train to an interstellar highway. Her companion explained that the demon lord's lands are divided into sectors, and the endless sky makes travel easy and safe. Later, two girls discussed the local taverns. One noted that despite the ban on alcohol sales, the establishments were thriving, and the blonde was surprised to learn that they weren't serving wine at all, but synthetic blood. The conversation revealed a curious detail: demon blood has a distinctive flavor, so artificial blood has become a popular substitute. One woman sheepishly admitted she thought it was tomato juice, prompting a laugh from her friend. Having tasted human blood, Lilith experienced mixed feelings, from disgust to a strange admiration. She understood why this product is considered a delicacy and why people often become victims for it. The robed girl wondered if the boy's status or his magic were the reason he was being shunned. The man with the eye patch mockingly teased her, while the woman with long hair merely remarked on his unnaturalness in the human world. Then Rayla slammed the book shut and explained that some people were able to wield magic due to their natural gifts, but others had to develop alchemy to compensate for their lack of power. Suddenly, one of the girls fell face forward, and her friend immediately ran up, anxiously asking if she was okay, not believing her attempt to say that everything was fine. The victim blinked in confusion, not understanding what had happened. The princess noticed a crack in her face with concern, and before she could help, she jerked her hand away, causing the crown to fall to the floor. Rayla quickly explained that she'd found the stone herself and hadn't noticed its fragility, but promised to fix it. However, Lilith sighed heavily, and at that very moment, her skin began to crack like porcelain, leaving Rayla speechless. Astra, gazing intently at the flask's glow, conducted an alchemical experiment and noted that the sensation was different from magic. Lilith watched with interest, acknowledging that alchemy truly could work miracles. Reino paused for a moment, then asked if a truly omnipotent force existed. The girl with the 2 buns of hair smiled, replying that omnipotence was a myth, and the difference between magic and alchemy lay in the way we understood the world. She continued that recreating a living person is the greatest taboo, as it interferes with the laws of nature. But, looking at him, she added that he himself is proof that the taboos have already been broken. The girl politely apologized to the little girl for the inconvenience, but she only smiled and offered to treat her to something sweet, mentioning a delicious berry pie that was worth trying. Both sat on the bench, happily devouring the delicacies. One exclaimed in delight at how delicious it was, while the other took a bite and, her eyes shining, called for everyone to join her. Rayla noted that pleasure wasn't her primary goal, as joy always concealed responsibility. Then the second girl admitted that in her past life, she'd been embarrassed about buying fashionable things, but now she truly enjoyed such small things. The girl with long hair hesitantly admitted that she didn't yet know what to strive for, while the little princess next to her said, confused, that she herself didn't know what to do. Both confessions hung in the air, tinged with a hint of despair. Meanwhile, 2 fairies with transparent wings noticed they were being watched. At the far table, 2 other figures, one wearing glasses, were whispering, discussing the fact that they were seeing real nymphs and marveling at Princess Pettilade's diminutive size. The nymphs gently assured the girl that they were well protected in the demon lands and considered refugees. One of them extended her hand, offering to shake it, but the princess hesitated, asking if it wasn't strange that refugees were free to roam the world. The winged girls admitted they felt more at ease with the demon lord and the young princess, and then cautiously asked if she could protect them if trouble came. The princess listened silently, understanding the gravity of their request. One of the nymphs revealed that their kind was half divine, half demonic. They had once lived among humans, but due to their special powers, they became hunted and were forced to seek refuge here, in the land of darkness. On the bench, the girl thoughtfully explained that demons hunt humans, and humans hunt gods. Hearing this, her interlocutor's eyes widened, finally grasping the complexity and purity of this cycle. The 2 nymphs stood side by side, and the princess, looking into the distance, pondered those who now placed their hopes in her. She decided that she must do something that only she could do, and not someone else in her place. Rayla stretched, smiling brightly, and Celeste, sitting next to her, looked at her warmly. The girl with short black hair noted that the decision had been made, and the path was no longer in doubt. Soon, the trio turned around at the confident woman's cry, warning them that they could no longer act thoughtlessly, for unlike her, they were mortal. With that, she leaped away, disappearing over the rooftops. One of the girls called out to the princess as she walked away, holding the hand of her younger companion. Behind her, the remaining 2 exchanged brief words of encouragement, assuring each other that everything would certainly work out well. The princess walked thoughtfully along the alley and admitted to herself that she didn't yet know where she was going, but she felt an inner need to change the world in her own way, because she was the youngest and didn't fit into the usual order. Under the moonlit sky, the short-haired girl apologized for keeping her friend wandering around the city all evening. The little girl in the crown replied that perhaps the maids were already worried that she had been away for so long. Under the streetlights, the confident girl assured her embarrassed companion that she wouldn't reveal her true origins. Then the woman smiled and admitted that she had finally found a purpose in this new world. A crown, a symbol of power, appeared on the stage screen, and a voice declared, "The Demon Lord's throne must be seized as quickly as possible for the sake of peace and coexistence." The princess paled, realizing this meant a series of mortal duels. Meanwhile, a confident woman presented the sword Skofnung, crafted through alchemy and accessible only to the hero, to the delight of the audience. Rayla decided to discuss this strange sword with someone more experienced, but her friend next to her frowned, admitting that she didn't want to be a hero and wasn't ready for such expectations. The girl remembered how she once woke up in a new world, how a monster attacked her, how she lost hope until someone's voice said, "Even if the body has changed, the inner self remains the same." The pink-haired heroine asked if the voice belonged to him, and the young man replied that he only nudged her, since he was not able to change immaterial things such as the heart and soul. The princess mused that the immaterial could also be shaped by sheer willpower. A woman with long dark hair placed her hand on her shoulder and confidently declared that together they could change this world. The final scene shows an empty throne room with a majestic chair and an ancient painting above it. Smoke rises beyond the castle walls, and a blindfolded girl, blinded by anger, condemns the audacity of anyone who dared to set foot in the princess's chambers. A girl in a maid's uniform held a black rabbit doll and narrowed her eyes suspiciously, thinking the toy was mocking her title. A man standing nearby turned away, noticing that someone in the castle clearly held a grudge against her. A woman with dark wings stood by a massive chair, declaring that the invasion of Sheltons was an open declaration of war against her. She demanded immediate action, while there was still time to stop the enemy. The princess flushed with anger at being called even more irritating than the weak Hyo. Someone clutched a rabbit doll in their hands, and then a cry rang out. One of those present declared that they had finally understood something. The girl, raising her chin, said with bold confidence that she would be the first to take the mana core from the shrimp, adding that even useless ones could serve as food for her. The narrator told of the sword of the Chosen One, a sacred weapon created to slay demons. Then the young warrior confessed with a heavy heart that he had lost the sword and didn't know where to look for it. Rayla tightened his belt and, glancing in the mirror, quietly confirmed his decision. At that very moment, a vortex portal appeared nearby, swirling with bright streams of energy. The girl suddenly fell face-first onto the floor with a loud splash, stunning the watching young man. She quickly declared that she wasn't drowning and wasn't underwater, but quickly realized something strange was happening. Renee ran up, explaining that she'd been looking for him and had barely gotten here. He was surprised that she knew about the portal connecting his house to the city center and tried to figure out how she'd managed it. The girl began to speak hesitantly, but the young man, with a serious expression, interrupted her, noting that the situation seemed too unexpected. He took her hand, examining how much the woman he once knew had changed. Rayla gripped the hero's camping gear tightly, insisting that even if they sought peace, a fight would be inevitable. His words were decisive and sobering to everyone around him. The princess gazed thoughtfully into the distance, remembering the young man's determination to change himself. Then she realized that she, too, had to see it through to the end if she wanted to achieve her own goals. The girl reassured her companion that no one was nearby. He looked around and asked if this was her room, to which she nodded and added that she would not allow herself to lose in the coming battles for power. The princess asked Renee if he'd heard of the chosen sword, intended only for heroes. Receiving an affirmative answer, she suggested they get down to business without wasting time on small talk. Rayla frowned, remembering that he'd seen something similar long ago, but couldn't remember where he'd put it. The girl next to him exclaimed in confusion that he couldn't have simply forgotten something like that. Soon a stern voice rang out. Someone scolded another for being messy and ordered them to learn to clean up after themselves, calling it basic manners. The young man blinked in confusion, while the third person present quietly wondered if there was something more to it. The boy promised to reform and become responsible before he became an adult. The girl replied that adulthood wouldn't eliminate her problems and reminded him of how they had recently searched for a missing item in the open air. The man advised the young warrior to deal with the demons first before grabbing all the weapons at once. The girl next to him paused, admitting she had no idea why the sword was so important. Under the cold moonlight, one of the men accused the other of monster attacks near the city. The accused remained silent until the girl suddenly grabbed the aggressor's arm, causing him to recoil. The boy fell awkwardly onto the maid, who, without losing her composure, asked her not to scold him too harshly, promising to explain the rules to him later. Meanwhile, the others debated whether to expel the irresponsible residents. Lilith quietly apologized for forcing him to do this, and Reno gently brushed a strand of her hair from her face. He thought that despite all the changes, the people in this place remained the same. Rayla dropped to one knee and gently took the little girl's hand, explaining that she had been abandoned by her parents. She looked down thoughtfully and then admitted that she considered him her father, adding with a slight smile that his family seemed to have a bad reputation. The girl recalled how the villagers tried to make him a hero, even though he'd only raised her and wasn't seeking fame. She noted that people had grown accustomed to his eccentricities and advised him to ignore them. Rayla said seriously that he never aspired to be a hero, and the girl thought that was precisely his problem. Then he looked at her curiously, as if trying for the first time to understand what she meant. The girl anxiously asked if the sword had disappeared from the city, but the young man pointed to its location. They quickened their pace, deciding to personally inquire about the find. The two approached the shopkeeper, asking about the sword without a price tag, noticing it was simply hanging there, like a towel drying. The merchant explained that the blade was either poorly forged or rusted, and that it was constantly being returned because no one could draw it from its sheath. The boy held out the sword and offered to take it if she liked it. She blinked in surprise, and he added that the weapon looked genuine and was perhaps much more valuable than it appeared. Rayla warned the young man not to swing the blade needlessly, suspecting he was being too reckless. At that moment, the girl exclaimed with delight that before them stood the hero himself, who had lost his talisman many years ago. The horned girl couldn't believe her ears when the sword spoke. The hero calmly confirmed that he had found it after 10 years of waiting, during which it served as an ordinary towel rack. The young man apologized guiltily, and the tiny figure asked why he'd allowed himself to be sold. The hero, frowning, admitted he'd been too young then and flared up, brandishing his sword as he recalled the past. The blade told how he had once twirled it in the air for fun, then forgotten and gone home. Afterward, the locals picked up the sword and resold it until it became a merchandise, losing its meaning. The girl was told that she had a keen eye for such a young age, and the man with the sword admitted that she understood things better than the hero himself, whom he called untalented. The hero froze, holding his blade at the ready, and thought that the child before him might be something more. Then he cautiously asked if she was human or a demon. The girl panicked, feeling that her soul belonged to her own, but fearing Renee would discover the truth. Meanwhile, another observer noticed a strange glow from her soul, half vampiric, half demonic. A confident girl wearing a crown proudly declared herself the third princess, the daughter of the demon lord himself, who rules over darkness. Her cloak billowed behind her, emphasizing the solemnity of the moment. Rayla shouted at Hayo, demanding an explanation. She, pale, insisted she hadn't lied, but her words stuck in her throat. The young man stood silently, clutching his sword so tightly his knuckles turned white. He refused to listen to excuses, insisting that an alliance with a vile creature was madness. Meanwhile, the figure opposite nervously averted his gaze, perplexed as to how the demon lord's daughter had ended up among humans. Reno offered to take the strange creature home to avoid a scandal, but Lilith anxiously noted that she didn't know what to do. Meanwhile, someone angrily demanded that the creature be removed from sight immediately. Rayla shouted sharply, "Stop," drawing his weapon, and a flash of light illuminated the room. The hostile figure staggered, trying to resist, but the force of the command weakened it. Rayla and the girl looked in amazement at Celeste, whose body began to shimmer. She, holding back tears, admitted that she hated her body, it smelled of blood and beast, and Rayla carefully asked why she despised herself so much. The sword, introducing itself as Skofnung, proudly declared that it was created to slay demons and was the greatest blade of its kind. The two listeners exchanged confused glances, unsure why the hero would drag a demon along with him. Reno apologized guiltily and asked the others to be understanding of Hayo, but Lilith dismissed this with annoyance, calling it nonsense. The young girl then explained that Hayo dreamed of peace and possessed powers capable of ending the eternal feud between the races. One of the warriors furiously rejected the idea of peace with the demons, declaring that an alliance with the hero was shameful. At that very moment, someone screamed at the top of their lungs, unable to contain their emotions, and the air filled with uneasy tension. Rayla firmly declared that he and Hayo were comrades and would not discuss it further. But the other woman coldly replied that she would not follow him as long as the sword was nearby, remaining aloof from the group. Lilith flared with anger, accusing those around her of disrespect, since she had saved the human world more than once. In response, one of the girls wearily thought that Lilith was overconfident and exhaled heavily, feeling her irritation growing. The girl abruptly declared that she wasn't going to waste her time on a brash little brat and quickly turned away. The man next to her tried to calm her down, thinking the whole argument sounded more like a childish squabble than an adult conversation. Rayla tried to maintain his composure as Lilith taunted him, accusing him of being childish. Then he couldn't take it anymore and shouted at her for being so insolent, while Astra, standing a little distance away, quietly snapped her fingers. A soft dripping sound was heard, after which the agitated girl ominously declared that she would rip off someone's wings and sew them to their head. A second figure calmly advised her to calm down and fly away, while a third thoughtfully noted that the future looked bleak. Lilith suddenly became wary, sensing something was wrong, and at that very moment, the bat screamed in panic that the castle was engulfed in flames. The group froze, stunned by the alarming news. The princess remembered the name Toka, Hayo's older sister, the demon lord's second eldest daughter, and ruler of the fourth region, Shounen. Her eyes widened as she realized that Toka was behind the attack. The young man was stunned to realize that his sister had led the attack, and realizing the scale of what was happening, he quickly asked if anyone in the castle had survived. The pink-haired girl realized that the fight for the throne had begun and decided to immediately head to the portal leading to the castle to assess the damage. Reino grabbed the princess's arm and stopped her, warning her that it was too dangerous to return alone. She struggled, but he held her firmly, declaring that he would not let her die. Under the moonlight, they told her that the most important thing now was to survive, as chaos reigned after the attack. Returning would only deepen the panic among those still trying to protect her. The young man looked at the princess and told her that she must fulfill her duty, despite her fear. Then she clenched her fist, determined to face her strongest brothers and sisters, even if the outcome was already known. The girl gently told her comrade that everything would definitely work out, and the other, with a firm look, promised not to let him fight alone, sharing the risk and responsibility with him. Rayla recoiled in surprise when offered the chance to join forces and categorically refused, declaring he wouldn't fight alongside a demon. Then the two nearby confidently declared they were ready, they had the hero and his sword. Skofnung asked for help, but she didn't respond. Even when he asked again, she coldly refused, and only the others explained that it was all for the sake of saving the hero. Rayla grabbed the weapon, declaring that was enough. The blade flew from his hand and, whistling through the air, described an arc, flaring in a silver flash. The small creature ordered everyone to be led to the gate connecting the world with Shultens, promising that they could return and report to the others afterwards. The blonde woman standing nearby listened silently, her eyes filled with concern. Meanwhile, on the throne, another girl noticed that Hayo hadn't returned. The maid with the mirror assumed the threat had forced her to flee, vividly imagining the scene in the burning castle. A confident girl with fiery eyes declared that she would become the demon lord and make all her brothers and sisters bow their heads. A black cat nearby proudly arched its back and declared that it was the strongest here. A creak was heard behind the door, and a maid loudly announced Hayo-sama's arrival. At that very moment, a woman's booming laughter echoed from the next room, cheerfully calling the princess in. The young man and woman stood side by side when a servant announced that Toka would be arriving soon. A moment later, confident footsteps echoed down the hallway, and a female voice quipped that someone had already stopped using honorifics. A dark-robed girl with a mocking look warned the nervous crown holder not to irritate her, otherwise she would not be shown mercy when it was all over. In a spacious classroom, a teacher with his hair parted into black and white confidently recited the main story and fun facts. Two attentive students listened before the lesson even began. A shy new girl named Hayo timidly introduced herself to the kindergarten class, and two students watched her, One thought the girl clearly wanted to make friends, while the other noted with irritation that this was annoying her. Rayla explained to his companion that the world consists of two layers, the demon realm and the human realm, connected by gates active on full moon nights. The girl, surprised, asked which gates humans and demons use. Two girls sat on the floor, discussing how the pond in Hyo-chan's garden connected to the lake in Renekuen's town. They remembered that full moon nights were considered bad omens, that's when monsters appeared. The young hero chided someone for wasting their potential, and a figure standing nearby calmly explained that guardians are usually half human, half demon, and they watch over the safety of the human world. Rayla asked why demons' names differed from human ones, and Astra suggested it was due to the kanji script, a common trait among their kind. Rayla admitted she'd never thought about it. Three children sat together, one dozed, another asked if it was really them, and the third nodded affirmatively. The woman explained with a smile that the child was originally Japanese and could read names by the sound of kanji, after which she cheerfully announced that the lesson was over for the day. The cheerful girl jumped up, delighted by the lightness and freedom from the perpetual fatigue of being 8 years old. A calm man nearby asked her in surprise what she meant, causing her confusion and bewilderment. The girl laughed and said his shoulders never hurt, calling him a child. The man calmly replied that he had lived for hundreds of years and knew perfectly well what he was talking about, asking if it was so terrible not to age. Astrid explained that the Skofnung sword was created through alchemy, adding that she was the one who created Lilith, who looked just like Celeste. Celeste was surprised and asked if he could be related, but Astrid denied it with a smile. Celeste complained that one guy was too sloppy and fickle, and vowed to confront him the next time they met. However, when another girl started teasing her, she blushed sharply and demanded they stop talking, which only heightened her interlocutor's interest. Late that evening, the princess was caught by a maid who asked her why she had left her chambers. Smiling, the maid offered to cook something, and the princess awkwardly admitted she simply wanted to take a short walk. The girl checked her bag, listing the necessary items, an umbrella, a first aid kit, and several amulets. Then she quietly promised to be careful and decided to leave some of her things at Renaud's house. History once again recalled the merciless struggle for the throne, a competition between the children of the demon lord, where the winner is the one who takes the heart mana of their relatives, sparing no one. Two girls locked eyes on the stone stairs. One said this wasn't just an argument, but a fight, with their lives at stake and no turning back. Rayla listened silently as Dragos admitted he'd never seen anything like this with his own eyes, even though he thought he knew everything about such battles. Now he realized that theory was no match for actual combat. The girl is astonished to realize that standing before her is another representative of the royal family, her older sister, whose aura and mana are noticeably different from other demons. She must still be quite young, but the power emanating from her evokes both respect and alarm. A girl with short, blonde hair pensively says that this is probably what motherhood feels like, looking at the young princess standing before her. The crowned princess watches silently, showing neither surprise nor emotion. The confident warrior noted that her rival must have come to beg for mercy. The girl across from her froze, hesitant to respond, until the other woman calmly extended her hand with a mysterious smile. A short-haired girl awkwardly grabbed her collar as a woman with curled locks offered to spare her life in exchange for her mana core. Her voice was soft, yet threatening, and her hand reached closer, demanding that she give up what belonged to her soul. Rayla suddenly takes a sip from the small cup Celeste is holding. Celeste looks up in surprise as Rayla winces in pain, as if the drink has burned him from the inside. The girl spits out the liquid, crying out in pain, while two nearby watch with concern. Suddenly, a figure with long hair calmly licks the residue from her fingers, causing shock and confusion among the others. Coming to her senses, she furiously declares that she has come not to make peace, but to fight, and cries out that her rage has reached its limit. At that moment, darkness rises around her, and the girl standing nearby recoils in fear. The pink-haired girl is suddenly enveloped in a pillar of flame emanating from a figure in a royal cloak. The figure coldly threatens to burn her to ashes, turning her body to ash and her soul to a core. The girl snaps her fingers and calmly explains that fire is Toka's special power, controlled by her emotions. Then she waves her hand, causing an explosion of flames that shakes the walls, while the other participant tries in vain to contain the destructive energy. A girl accidentally encounters a young man running through the castle corridors. A woman standing aside orders him to be kept under surveillance, noting that human blood on the carpet would be an unnecessary problem, while another woman disgustedly declares that humans have no place here. Four masked women line up before the kneeling man. One coldly calls him a wretched mortal, while the other adds that they are merely following the princess's orders, feeling neither guilt nor emotion. Rayla approaches, assessing the situation. He notes with disappointment that the opponents are mere trifles, but still offers his strength, mentally preparing himself for the coming battle. The red-haired girl thanks Kofa, but then sharply asks what that name means, and with a crash thrusts her sword into the ground, causing a short wave of magic to flare up. A girl in a maid's uniform insists that the long phrase needs to be shortened, otherwise it will be impossible to remember, and the young man standing next to him listens attentively, trying not to laugh. The horned demoness snorted incredulously at the other's weak command, calling her a disgrace to her kind. The blonde, however, asked in surprise why she was dragging a human servant around with her, seeing no point in it. The pink-haired girl abruptly declares that it is because of this guy that she is here, but before she can finish, a powerful explosion is heard nearby, a blinding flash makes her jump back, and the figure in the dark dress covers her eyes. Rayla nervously defends himself by saying it was just a joke, but Celeste, her wings shimmering with light, looks at him warily, wondering why he's losing his composure. The pink-haired girl can barely stand, feeling her strength draining away. But despite her fatigue, she hoarsely declares that she won't give up, deciding to use the unique properties of her magic to turn the tide of battle. She gathers her courage and decides to ignite a new will to win within herself, while the figure in the black dress standing opposite her ponders how to reduce Toka's power by distracting her emotions and weakening the flames. The girl abruptly demands action, despite the fear and pain, while the man next to her advises against trying to be an adult just yet, as being too harsh could ruin everything. Both look tense, knowing that the next mistake will be their last. Toka flinches when someone suddenly declares that these outfits don't suit her at all. Her eyes widen, and her lips tremble as if struck. The demon princess's pride is unaccustomed to such direct insults. Flaring with rage, she plunges her blade into her opponent and accuses him of never having warned her about the hatred behind her back. Then she adds sarcastically that it seems he's simply forcing them to work harder. The girl with the twin tails retorts sharply, her face flushed red with shame and anger. The other, watching from the side, calmly notes that the flames have dimmed, meaning the attack has succeeded and proved quite effective. Wounded but stubborn, the warrior refuses to listen to anyone's words, unwilling to admit weakness. Meanwhile, someone watching from the shadows mentally notes that Toki's confidence is merely a facade, as the true danger comes not from her, but from Hayo. The girl clenches her fists and furiously rebukes her interlocutor for daring to refuse honorifics. Another figure watches her from afar, and at that moment, a third rushes forward, begging her to stop before it's too late. Rayla sullenly asks if her rival is willing to kill her for the mana core. She replies with icy calm that this is precisely what the battle for the throne is for, and that their father would probably be pleased to see her dead. The girl in the dark dress hesitates for a moment, but the princess in the crown sharply asks why she is retreating. Is she afraid of being wounded like a mere mortal? Rayla clutches her weapon and furiously threatens to kill the invisible speaker if he doesn't shut up. However, the voice continues with cold certainty, accusing her of being unprepared for either the murder of her kin or the sudden confrontation that would decide the fate of her inheritance. The girl with the bow declares that she is knowingly risking her life, and at the same moment her opponent flinches in fear. Footsteps approach, someone announces that the man has been dealt with, and everyone becomes wary. Rayla bursts into the room and breathes a sigh of relief upon seeing Renee alive, albeit with burns. He calmly announces that he dealt with the attackers himself, which leaves her both shocked and delighted. The wounded demon admits he held back, unable to understand how a mere human could defeat demons. The others are stunned, and the young man introduces himself as Hero Ernest, a man determined to fight against both demons and humans. The girl with short hair demands to give up the cannonball, but the confident woman with horns mockingly replies that it doesn't matter even if she managed to do something like that. After all, strength and pride are not for sale. One of the fighters suggests finishing off the prisoner to put him out of his misery, but another strictly forbids killing. The third stands to the side, watching silently, with a grim determination in his eyes. Rayla is surprised, realizing she's not ready to kill, despite all her grandiose words. Dragos notes how much she's changed, and Rayla ponders why Toka doesn't want to fight seriously, suspecting an ulterior motive. In exasperation, she exclaims that she's only holding back out of fairness, as otherwise the fight would be unequal. Reino smirks and asks if this is a game, and after a brief argument, allows her to lick the blood from his wound to restore her strength. The girl swallows hard as he addresses her, and suddenly feels his hand brush against her fingers with his tongue. The man sharply demands to know why she wants to become the Demon Lord, and angrily refuses to share his motives. Rayla feels her mana draining and can barely keep her feet as a powerful blast of energy shoots towards her. She screams, warning that anyone who fights without a firm goal must immediately abandon the path of the heirs. A girl in a gothic dress notices the defaced portrait and instantly realizes, this is not just an insult, but a declaration of war from one of the sisters. The others are horrified to realize that one of them has dared to directly challenge them. At the top of the stairs, in the glow of torches, stands a figure on a throne. She asserts with authority that the anger is entirely justified, as this is all the work of Lilia One-sama. Someone nearby glares at her, unabashedly hostile. The girl clenches her fist so hard her knuckles turn white, and through clenched teeth she admits that, as the youngest, she's tired of always being the first to be humiliated and destroyed. A determination flashes in her eyes. This time, she won't let herself be broken. The pink-haired girl recalled the moment someone asked her why she wanted to become a demon lord, calling her by her first name, Toka. The question lingered in her mind like a quiet echo, returning again and again. She then declared firmly and without hesitation that she would kill everyone, brothers, sisters, and anyone who dared surpass her. Her goal was to prove herself the strongest and create a world where no one would be above her once she became the Demon Lord. A girl in a richly embellished dress looks down thoughtfully, musing that the desire to become stronger isn't so bad after all. Meanwhile, in the depths of the room, a mysterious figure silently watches from beneath a hood, as if assessing her resolve. A girl with short hair and glasses warns a determined warrior with a spiky hairstyle that, after killing everyone and becoming the Demon Lord, she will be left alone because no one will recognize a power that has no witnesses. The conversation emphasizes that strength and weakness only make sense when there's someone to compare oneself to. Without rivals, there will be no recognition or praise, and even the greatest power will lose its meaning. Cracks appear on the stunned girl's face, as if her body can't bear the internal tension. Then another, more determined one, exclaims, asking if this is truly the world he wants to build, a world without love or respect. A girl with long hair, holding back tears, admits to feeling fear after her older sister's attack. Someone watches from afar, wondering if they alone could handle such an enemy. Rayla calmly explains that if she takes possession of someone else's core first, she can strengthen their magic and fight back. However, the girl, sitting on the floor, anxiously thinks she doesn't have the strength even for that, and she clasps her hands, unsure what to do. Lilith expresses concern, and the pink-haired princess admits she's also worried. The blonde next to her asks for a share of her power, believing it to be her last chance to stand against the remaining heirs. The girl hesitates, tormented by doubts, while the young man reminds her of the rules and insists that the winner must take the core. She firmly replies that she does not wish to take someone else's, even if it disrupts the course of the battle. Rayla awkwardly tries to explain her desire for change, and Reino listens calmly, without interrupting. Suddenly, Lilith appears nearby, startling Rayla, who remarks with a slight chuckle that he seems different. The pink-haired girl gently reassures her companion, insisting that she prefers her current self. She then gently strokes her head, the soft sound reminiscent of a soft sigh of relief. Reino worriedly asks what to do next, as the girl might be attacked again if she stays here. The horned demoness angrily declares that she won't let anyone point a finger at her, and the little girl bows gratefully, whispering words of thanks. Rayla suggests using the mark, explaining to the others that it's an ancient royal blood ritual that establishes a bond between master and subordinate. Such rituals were recently allowed again after a major battle was won. The short-haired girl braces herself as the other explains that if she receives the mark, the enemy's attention will be drawn to the other girl. It then becomes clear that the mark didn't work initially. When her blood was drained, this shocks the pink-haired girl. Rayla grumbles silently, thinking they're making things too complicated, and Dragos, with a slight smile, declares that he'll take that as a voluntary surrender. After a pause, Lilith, surprised, allows Toka to bare her fangs and complete the ritual. Rayla manages to catch the staggering girl before she falls. Both are breathing heavily, recovering from the ritual, and when the third participant asks about their future plans, Rayla replies thoughtfully that they will have to act differently now. Haya wearily admits she just wants to get some sleep, but the curly-haired companion insists they call a carriage, as the servants have already finished their shift. A young man nearby offers to take the girl back to the castle to avoid rumors. Raylo insists that she must come with them, despite the possible risks, and his words cut short all objections. Then one of the companions notes to himself that this is the first time he's encountered a demon who prefers to settle disputes with words rather than with a sword. Rayla cautiously asks how the young guest received her wounds and asks her to stay a little longer. She nods quietly in agreement, a warm but tired smile appearing on her face as if she feels safe for the first time in a long time. The day after her battle with Toka, the girl lies in bed, wrapped in a soft blanket, while a black cat growls at her not to wake her. But suddenly, the door bursts open with a bang, and she jumps up, startled by the sudden noise. A confident guest stands at the door, holding the same cat in her arms, and with a lazy smile demands entertainment. After all, she didn't come to this dreary castle for nothing. The girl in the simple dress nods, confused, agreeing out of politeness, though she doesn't know how to surprise her. The pink-haired princess is surprised to hear that someone lives in this wing of the castle. A calm voice from the shadows replies that there was no need to mention it, as the furnishings already give it away. Lilith is slightly taken aback and asks if the reason is because he didn't want to be alone. The man sharply objects, declaring that there are no rules requiring him to be with her after the marking ceremony. The pink-haired girl flares up with anger and accuses her interlocutor of damaging the castle, insisting that the repairs are his fault. He raises his hands defensively, denying the accusations and claiming he had nothing to do with it. The girl with the crown abruptly declares that her feelings have nothing to do with loneliness or fear. On the contrary, she is confident, and the other participant in the conversation only awkwardly agrees. After a short pause, the princess decisively declares that it's time to get down to business. Lilith angrily declares that this room is hers and demands everyone leave. To prove her point, she sets fire to the curtains, which she dislikes, while Reina angrily complains that she is now forced to sleep in the tiny guest room, despite her high status. Rayla glances around, sarcastically criticizing the room's decor, and, spinning around, notices that her shoes are starting to get hot. She then decides to replace them with orange velvet ones, grumbling under her breath that at least they're not melting. She indignantly refuses to live in such a squalid space, crossing her arms and declaring that it's no wonder the children here grow up so wild. Bright draperies hang around her, lending a theatrical air to the scene. Rayla reflects on how her room used to be just a place to sleep, devoid of interest or comfort. Then she admits that if she'd taken her mind off battles, she could have been a normal girl her age, a little hot-tempered, but dreaming of sweet things. A memory shows her holding a doll. A girl happily shows off a shelf filled with stuffed animals, admiring their cuteness, while her friend frowns, throws one away, and grumbles that it looks like a strange ritual, not a hobby. Rayla watches in horror as the closet bursts into flames and panics as she tries to put it out. Lilith, standing to the side, comments that all the outfits inside are identical and declares the vanity to be hers alone, adding that Rayla is too young for makeup. The princess grumbles that there is nothing useful here except hair accessories, to which the second one reluctantly agrees, admitting that she is right about this, albeit with a slight doubt. Feeling hungry after cleaning, Rayla orders everyone to stop burning things and making a mess, then firmly declares it's time to order food. After a pause, she asks where the person who usually brings the lunches is. The girl with the crown perks up and says curiously that she would like to taste this man's blood, causing the other one, wrapped in a fur cape, to freeze in bewilderment. The pink-haired one pensively says that she's never tasted a hero's blood, having only ever had bottled blood. The other one nearly drops her goblet, shocked by such a frank admission. Raylo lies on the floor, exhausted and starving, while Lilith coldly declares that she only drinks blood for mana. She threatens to do it right now if the hero isn't brought, and at that moment, Celeste appears in the doorway, frozen in shock. A fight breaks out on the floor, two girls grapple, one growling, the other screaming, accusing her rival of selfishness and demanding an immediate end to this disgrace. The air fills with the chaotic clanking of furniture. Lilith orders her sister to sit down, but, failing to achieve this, she grabs her hand and roughly forces her to sit down. Then, with icy calm, she reminds her that, as the younger sister, she is obligated to obey, and that the elder's wishes are law for all. Toka suddenly freezes when someone sharply shouts her name. Confused, she tries to understand what's happening, but then another girl accuses her of using magic, suspecting that the very same mark that binds their destinies is to blame. The girl with short hair confidently demands the other to apologize for playing with fire. In response, the girl in the dress struggles to contain the power that suddenly flared within her, trying to regain control and bracing herself for what's to come. The princess angrily repeats her demand for an apology, adding the threat that her opponent will lose the ability to stand if she doesn't comply. Sitting on the floor, the girl, gritting her teeth, vows to one day avenge the humiliation she suffered. Lilith defiantly turns away and announces she's going to lunch, but Rayla sharply asks her to stop, clenching her fists in anger. A moment later, Lilith begins to tremble and hurriedly apologizes, admitting she acted selfishly, but Rayla coldly declares she won't listen. Soon, Rayla offers to share a room with her and promises to provide her with everything she needs. Feeling ashamed and humiliated, Rayla sits down on the floor and reluctantly accepts the offer, deciding it's better than being alone. As she enters, coughing, someone smirks at how amused she seems. Another voice sarcastically accuses her of flirting, but she flushes and insists it wasn't flirting, but an argument. Two girls hide behind a curtain, tensely debating whether it's human or something else. Then the stern woman calmly explains that while it may appear human, it's actually the embodiment of the hero's sword. Rayla can't believe such a dangerous creature was allowed to roam the castle freely. Celeste, however, cautiously explains that the sword is designed to destroy demons and advises against angering its owner, as she could kill with a single blow. Celeste then explains that the others remain hidden, as they won't be able to return to the human world until dawn. She warns them not to wander too far in this form, but the woman, with a confident smile, promises she won't do anything stupid. A girl with long hair tells her that Renaud is being harassed by another woman, and two listeners, shocked, immediately ask where he is now and why she is not next to him. In the hallway, one of the girls rushes forward, trying to stop someone, while a man asks who they are. The stone-faced woman insists on using honorifics for the princess, but the man smirks, asking if he can speak more simply. The maid claims she hasn't heard of any adult male acquaintance and won't allow a man into the princess's chambers. Another maid, confused, asks where Hayo's room is. At that moment, Reno and Mimi enter the hall, and the girl joyfully greets them, calling them princess. Reno remains calm, but the reminder of the visit causes him to frown, while the maid anxiously awaits approval. The girl in the maid's uniform indignantly declares that the princess is too young to have relations with the opposite sex and categorically refuses to consent. The other two exchange confused glances, unsure how to respond to the argument. Reno calmly explains to Mimi that this man is his comrade and a mercenary who helped them in the battle with Toka. Hearing this, the girl breathes a sigh of relief, but still watches the stranger with suspicion. The maid still clarifies whether this is true, and the fair-haired man confirms that he really did care for the princess and helped her in difficult times. Rayla sheepishly apologizes for not immediately recognizing him as a friend and guest, and the pink-haired girl, blushing, nods with relief. Rayla then suggests a light dinner to smooth over the awkwardness and allow everyone to calm down. The girl with dark ribbons in her hair notices the stranger's golden eyes and instantly becomes wary, sensing something important is hidden behind those gazes. A disturbing thought flashes through her mind. Two girls are sitting on the sofa drinking tea. One is complaining about feeling like the mark is binding her like shackles, while the other is grumbling that she would never have agreed to the ritual, knowing its power. On the table between them are pastries and warm tea. The pink-haired princess speaks thoughtfully about her three older sisters, Kahaku, Hijui, and Lilia. She admits she rarely sees them, as each lives in her own world of intrigue and ambition. Rayla slams her fist on the table, annoyed that two of them have been bullying her since childhood. The other woman calmly concludes that they're talking about Hijui and Lilia, adding with a smirk that their feud with their younger sister seems to be eternal. Lilith recalls how she was once the youngest and therefore considered useless and weak. At tea parties, the elders constantly teased her, and whenever she burst into tears or got angry, they only laughed louder, turning her resentment into a game. In a fit of irritation, she recalls how her brother constantly stole her strawberries, and now accuses him of the same thing again. He calmly replies that it's her own fault for her behavior, while a third figure, off to the side, silently takes a berry and calmly eats it. The girl clenches her fists, remembering how her brother adored everything shiny and even stole their crowns. The memory makes her heart boil, while her other sister, tearfully begging for her crown back, stands nearby. Then Lilith silently lowers her gaze, wondering why he always did that. Later, Rayla discusses with her interlocutor that Toka is probably the most reasonable among them, while Lilia has a strange dislike for women, but is surprisingly protective of Hisui, showing gentleness towards him. The girl explains that the opponents remain in contact even after the battle for the inheritance begins. If one is attacked, the other will inevitably come to their aid, making it impossible to deal with them individually. Rayla ponders how siblings can simultaneously love and hate each other. Celeste merely nods, understanding why Rayla had previously failed to understand these complex feelings, where friendship coexists with hostility. She claims that siblings are destined to kill each other for the throne, and he admits that as an only child he never understood this, but still thinks it's even better this way, less suffering. The conversation reveals that demon lords, both past and present, often devour each other, strengthening their power through cannibalism. While this seems pointless, one participant insists it has a deeper meaning. Rayla firmly declares that she will not allow anyone's life to be in vain. Her interlocutor becomes thoughtful, recalling Hayo's battle with his siblings and the price each had already paid for power. She sighs heavily, feeling helpless, and he calmly says he won't change his mind and warns, history always repeats itself. He says this with the confidence of someone who has witnessed similar bloody cycles many times. The pink-haired princess confidently replies that even the smallest action can change everything, just as the flapping of a butterfly's wing can cause a storm. She adds that their steps have already begun to create waves of change. The conversation returns to tactics again. Someone suggests attacking Hisui if Toka agrees to an alliance. Another participant, slightly embarrassed, apologizes for the interruption and expresses a timid but sincere hope for success. The girl perks up and declares she's ready to help destroy the elves, as she's been angry at them for a long time. The others are amazed by her determination, especially after learning that a vampire can survive without constantly drinking blood. Rayla explains that Hayo's power comes from her own blood, which is laced with magical poison. Thanks to this, the princess is able to manipulate both the blood and the poisonous currents, turning them into weapons. A little girl watches as a raven circles above them, its wings flapping loudly, while beneath it, a bat squawks and flutters helplessly. The raven suddenly soars upward, leaving behind silence and a faint trail of feathers. The girl panics and tries to stop the tiny black creature, but it breaks free, while two others watch from behind the wall. One recognizes it as Hayo's familiar, while the other, narrowing his eyes, watches with curiosity. A girl with long hair abruptly points to the creature behind the crowned figure and claims it's Hisuiani-Isama's familiar. The scene escalates, and everyone freezes, aware of the potential intrusion. A princess in a ceremonial gown screams in fear as someone sinks fangs into her neck. She realizes she's about to be marked with blood and desperately tries to break free, feeling the alien energy awakening within her. Her body weakens, her movements become unsteady, and a strange mark appears on her neck. She realizes she hasn't been marked before, but now she feels the mark finally taking hold, pulsing beneath her skin. Someone off to the side picks up a small crystal and calmly proclaims that it's the Hayo core. A faint, almost mad smile appears on his lips, while a scarlet drop of blood slowly trickles from the corner of his mouth. The girl lifts a dark scarlet stone, shimmering deeper than garnet or ruby, into the air and calmly examines it in the reflections of the light. A blackbird flutters its wings around her, as if confirming the value of the treasure she has found. Then she gently reassures those present, assuring them not to worry, this crystal will take its rightful place on a pedestal, not around someone's neck. Seated in an elegant robe, she radiates cool calm and confidence. Rayla, barely catching her breath, asks to be assigned the fight and steps aside. At that moment, a crowned figure, covered in dark splashes, steps forward, colliding with a short girl in a lace dress, who exudes a dangerous tension. Rayla rushes to Hayo, who is lying on the ground, anxiously asking about her condition, but she only breathes weakly. Meanwhile, Dragos, frowning, expresses irritation that the enemy managed to escape. The girl faintly reflects on how lucky she is that he didn't manage to leave a mark. A woman nearby sharply remarks that an ambush is a disgrace for the nobility, and the man confirms that the culprit was Hijui's older brother. Rayla doesn't believe the medicine will work, as Lilith is complaining of searing pain. Then Dragos explains that she was bitten by fangs laced with venom, causing Hayo to be magically poisoned. Rayla ponders what to do next, while two companions discuss how this is the first time they've seen him bite anyone. Such behavior, one of them notes, is strictly forbidden among royal descendants. The woman expresses doubt that it's ordinary poison, and the girl adds that magical toxins can't be neutralized by conventional means. Then the man gloomily recalls the crystal that started it all and worries that they've lost it. Hayo lies unconscious, and the other explains that the core is a symbol of their royal nature. It stores and regulates mana, sustains life, and grants the right to the throne, so losing it could be catastrophic. The interlocutors discuss how the elder brother has always valued the cores and crowns above power itself. One suggests he hasn't yet managed to absorb her core, while the other insists it can still be reclaimed before it's too late. Rayla decisively announces that she will go and retrieve the Hayo core, much to the surprise of those present. Someone in the audience asks incredulously why she's going there if she doesn't aspire to the throne, but Rayla is already heading for the exit. She insists that a single human cannot win, but Dragos urges them to abandon the idea. Meanwhile, Reno restrains Lilith, warning that the enemy is too strong even for the three of them. Rayla still declares she'll go alone, since Koph will be with her. One of the girls calmly tries to dissuade her, but the maid at the door only watches sadly, realizing the futility of arguing. In another room, someone's hand drips liquid into a bowl, and a man quietly apologizes for everything that happened while she was with him. A woman nearby regretfully admits she should have been more careful, and a third calls out Prince Hijui's poison, and the others silently realize the scale of the threat. At night, outside a small building, a maid reassures two guests, telling them the doctor will arrive in the morning and urging them to rest. Inside, a young man cautiously opens the door, noticing a strange glow emanating from the wall. Astra moves closer and, feeling the heat, gently touches Lilith's forehead as she lies in bed. The girl is covered in sweat, and he softly calls her name, anxiously listening to her breathing. A girl with a bandage on her head is lying on the bed, and a guy next to her calmly asks if she is too hot or cold, if she wants a drink, then asks her name, quietly repeating, Renee. The girl weakly apologizes for disturbing her, and the man sitting next to her, upon closer inspection, realizes that her core has been stolen. He realizes that this is precisely what has caused her weakening and excruciating weakness. Choking back tears, she recalls Koph's words, when the other person gently assures her that her core is still intact and just needs to be returned to its place. These words give her a little strength. The young man sadly apologizes to the prostrate girl and promises that if he can't handle it himself, Toka will fulfill her request. Then she quietly admits that she feels useless and weakly asks what a recipe is, as if she's forgotten the meaning of simple words. One man asked if his interlocutor was planning to quit, but the other man wearily replied that he simply wasn't feeling well and wanted to rest a bit. Then the other man sternly remarked that he'd have to make up the missed hours and that if the job was a burden, it would be best to quit altogether. The girl, barely able to stand, began to choke and foam at the mouth, screaming in despair. The man, flaring with anger, told her to continue working until she died if she didn't want to leave on her own. She was shaking and barely holding on when he grabbed her head and shook her roughly, ordering her to pull herself together. Then, softening, he added that no one considered her a burden and that he wasn't worrying about her for his own gain. Hearing these words, she thanked him for the respite, and he acknowledged that she sometimes said strange things, but that's precisely what made her special. Then she quietly confessed that he was the first person to truly understand and accept her, giving her the strength to face her destiny. In response, he said he couldn't cope without her and that she was truly irreplaceable. At that moment, a confident woman burst into the room, loudly asking where the patient was. 3 people turned around, stunned by her appearance and unexpected audacity. Rayla frowned, noticing that the man who entered was clearly not the doctor they were expecting. Someone present sympathized with her painful story and turned toward the door, where the sound of footsteps came from. The woman introduced herself as OD, explaining that she had arrived to replace a doctor whose carriage had become stuck. The two listeners exchanged surprised glances, then noticed a strange force that seemed to have deliberately stopped the carriage. Someone asked how the new healer planned to treat the princess, and he calmly replied that he would use alchemy. The maid then quickly agreed to prepare the clothes for the procedure, feeling apprehensive. Rayla angrily stepped on someone's head, shouting that primitive magic couldn't cure the sick. Lilith, however, responded in amazement that alchemy was an outdated and useless art, reserved only for hopeless mortals. Soon, the confident woman announced that she was an old friend of Skofnung's, sitting down casually. Then the radiant figure and kneeling companion asked for the beginning. The man with the book explained to the young apprentice how to purify poison using alchemy. Astra calmly assured them there was no need to worry, adding that they would begin by analyzing the composition, taking a small amount of blood from the girl lying on the bed. Her skin shimmered faintly, as if responding to his words. Then the horn one grabbed the silver-haired mage by the arm and insisted that he, and not the demon obsessed with humans, take up alchemy. The dark-haired man watched silently, not interfering. Reynad reluctantly agreed to begin, though he expressed misgivings about the hero. Meanwhile, the narrative explained that alchemy is based on formulas that combine blood, magic, and matter, forming a single equation of life. Astra continued his explanation, comparing the process of breaking down the poison in the blood to the untangling of tangled threads, restoring the body's natural order. Rayla nodded thoughtfully, trying to grasp the gist. She said that she roughly understood what needed to be done and was confident that she could handle it, but her interlocutor warned her, alchemy requires not only strength, but also a precise understanding of the formulas, otherwise everything will go to waste. Rayla silently accepted the instruction, and then he admitted that since childhood he had possessed a natural sense of alchemy and was able to apply it without training, relying only on intuition. He then extended his palm, and a bright light instantly flared. The two girls watching from the table recoiled, seeing the air above his hand tremble and the energy interweave into glowing streams. At that very moment, the patient felt a sudden heat and tried to move. A boy and a girl with twin ponytails burst into the room, and she immediately rushed forward, loudly calling her name. Rayla's eyes widened, startled, and she asked what they were doing there. Then the girl standing next to her smiled and thanked someone for their help, looking warm and relieved. The short-haired girl was surprised to learn that the man standing before her was the same doctor who had examined her earlier. The others exchanged glances, stifling laughter and commenting on the strange yet amusing coincidence. The girl lying in bed quietly says that it is Ernest she should thank, but her bespectacled companion corrects her, explaining that the real healer is the young man standing next to her and watching her with a slight smile. Then the patient recalls Renee's words from yesterday, full of uncertainty and self-deprecation, and is genuinely surprised by the change in his voice. Meanwhile, the young man gently asks her not to worry and to relax. The girl timidly thanks Rain for his concern, and he warmly replies that he's glad to hear it. He then adds that thanks to her, he himself feels confident and seems to have regained a sense of purpose in his actions. After a short pause, Rayla says she has business that requires her to leave. Dragos wonders why she even came if she's leaving right now, and Celeste nods and calmly announces that she'll be taking her leave as well. Then Astra takes out a small metal mechanism and hands it to the stunned girl, explaining that it's a processing device capable of temporarily replacing her core. She, wide-eyed, barely comprehends what she's heard and asks what it's for. Rayla asks how strong the catalyst is and is told that the stone acts as a medium, instantly performing calculations and causing an alchemical reaction instead of regular mana. Astra adds that the core is merely a copy and requires immediate replacement if damaged. Another participant then notes that demons are poorly suited to alchemy and wonders if mere mortals could use this device. Rayla listens thoughtfully as her interlocutor explains that the device was made specifically for her. The conversation then turns to how demons have abandoned science for magic, and now only a few are able to master this art. Astra approaches Lilith, saying that her soul and mind belong to human nature. The girl freezes in amazement, speechless, while nearby, two men discuss who is the better weapon wielder. At that moment, there's a knock on the door, bringing a change of clothes. The tired princess agrees that for now they must rely on alchemy to confront Prince Hijui, as there are no other options available. The girl breaks down and cries loudly, and the man offers to go outside so she can change. Returning, he calmly says she looks much better now and admits he's glad to see her conscious. Meanwhile, Astra explains to Celeste that, possessing a human soul and intellect, she is capable of using both magic and weapons. Celeste listens anxiously, while a small observer nearby inquires about the device's features. There's another knock at the door. The maid is bringing clothes. The blonde reluctantly agrees that without alchemy, they won't be able to combat Prince Hijui's poison, no matter how powerful their own powers. Rayla suggests leaving to give her time to change, and a minute later, she remarks with relief that everything went well. From the room, an emotional cry comes from the maid, unable to contain her emotions. Afterwards, Rayla calls out to someone, only to discover that they've vanished without a trace. A boy nearby is confused, and then Rayla asks if he has a stomachache and, noticing his strange behavior, says with a slight smile that he looks out of place. A girl with long pink hair suddenly immerses herself in memories of her creator, thrilled at the thought of meeting her again. The two people standing nearby exchange glances, unsure of whom she's talking about. Then the pink-haired girl notices that the demon lord is older than she is, and can't comprehend the magnitude of this revelation. The shining figure explains that he passed his offspring on to the heroes so that they could one day defeat him. Suddenly, a scream rings out. One of the girls shouts Toki's name as the other rushes forward. A man in a cloak appears in the doorway, stunning both women. A woman in a crown abruptly grabs a maid by the collar and insistently asks where her younger sisters are. In response, the maid spits contemptuously on the floor, instantly causing disgust among those present. The princess accuses the maid of insolence and declares that if the master is stupid, then the servants are no better. The girl, frightened, refuses to answer, but the crowned figure grabs her by the shoulders, and a voice from behind her shouts, demanding that she stop. Two girls in lavish gowns exchanged sharp words. One mockingly remarked that another fool had arrived, while the other condemned the shameful attack on a defenseless servant. Their gazes met, and the air between them seemed to sparkle with hidden hostility. Rayla sarcastically mocked her opponent, reminding her that she had been defeated by her younger sister and now lived like a tamed animal. In response, her interlocutor clenched her fists but remained silent, suppressing a burst of anger. The twin-tailed girl addressed Toka coldly, calling her the biggest disgrace of them all. Toka didn't respond, looking down, and then the other girl narrowed her eyes, as if trying to read the hidden emotions in her face. The self-assured figure bit her hand, watching the crimson blood trickle down her fingers, and sarcastically commented that someone had spared their opponent's life out of pity, not taking the core. A nearby figure suggested she simply give it to them. The girl in the lace dress winced when the other declared she would add the desired item to her collection. The mechanism in her hands clicked and cracked, followed by a desperate cry of protest. Soon, a figure in a luxurious cloak appeared in the hall. The princess asked in surprise why the other was there, but the other calmly replied that she had simply come to thank her for the care shown recently. She then asked with a slight smile if he had come to return her core, and added that she was curious about the reason for his unexpected visit that day. The young king, standing nearby, was stunned by the sight of the girl in the royal cloak. She remained silent, looking him straight in the eye, and then he sharply asked what she was doing there and why she had come. The crowned girl stepped forward and demanded the return of her core, reminding her that it was not a toy. Her confident steps echoed throughout the hall, and her hand, making a beckoning gesture, clearly expressed her intent to fight. While two sisters argued over the throne, the third, watching from the sidelines, smirked mockingly, calling them both ridiculous and noting that they were both to blame for the discord. Their squabble gradually escalated into a storm. The short-haired girl was ordered to stall for time while another woman took the man. She trembled with fear, admitting she couldn't handle it, but her friend assured her everything was under control. The confident crown-bearer dismissively declared that even if she remained, she would be of no use. The other, unwilling to take any chances, decided to flee, abandoning Hyo and dismissing the entire scene as a pathetic game. Then one of the participants explained that killing the master transfers power over the mark, and with a merciless smile, she ordered the other to die quickly. Black tentacles spread from behind her, absorbing the light. The girl tensed, preparing for the blow, and activated a blood analysis spell. Her focused gaze reflected her determination to meet the attack, even if it meant sacrificing her body. The crown princess was attempting to dismember the unknown element with magic, though a nearby observer noted in surprise that she shouldn't have mastered magic at all. Beneath her, the built-in mechanism clicked quietly. The girl mentally resolved to hold out until Renee arrived, noting that her opponent had a keen gaze but was unlikely to be able to penetrate her defense. At the same time, he acknowledged her skill, even if he called it a fake. The next moment, one of the girls, unabashedly delighted, asked to take a closer look at the item and, flapping her arms, soared upward. Meanwhile, another character gazed admiringly at a rare brooch with tiny gears and a sparkling stone. Rayla waved her hands furiously, rejecting the offer of a trade. The man insisted, asking if she still wanted to hand over the core, but she abruptly declared that she would never part with it, as only she possessed this power. The crowned head insisted she wanted both options at once, calling her interlocutor selfish. He paused, concluded that the core had likely not yet been absorbed, and then reluctantly agreed to the deal. The young queen demanded the return of the core, declaring that without it she could not inherit the throne, and asked what she should give in return. The man in the crown calmly replied that she could take everything in his castle if she simply returned what belonged to her. One of the girls laughed mockingly, teasing her opponent for trying to bite her, calling it a pathetic attempt. In response, the other flared up in anger and desperately declared that she would not give up her cannonball, even if it meant fighting to the death. The cheerful figure in the sparkling crown enthusiastically announced that she wanted to add to her collection of jewels, as if what was happening was a game for her, and not a mortal combat. The girl was confused and weakly asked what all this was for, but immediately collapsed to the floor when the crowned head remarked with a smile that perhaps she was simply too young to understand the true charm of treasures. Then the determined contestant declared that her fate was at stake and she had no time for greed. At that very moment, someone's hand clutched the crown, and a voice in the shadows declared that for some, this battle was just another hunt for glittering stones. The girl cried out sharply that everything around her belonged to her, the lands, even their lives. She added that her helpless sisters needed protection, while the young man, who had been watching, stood in silence, unsure of how to respond. The crowned figure stated with cold-blooded confidence that she had always shown love and care, and even if she happened to steal, destroy or kill, she had no right to complain, such was her way. After this, the elder one sarcastically remarked to the younger one that if she was dissatisfied, she should have been born earlier. The younger one stood by the window, silently gazing into the distance, not saying a word, but her posture betrayed a sense of suppressed tension. Rayla couldn't resist and struck her crowned opponent hard. She cried out in pain, and scarlet blood spurted from her cut lip, showering the floor in marble drops. The girl, breathing heavily, accused her opponent of selfishness and madness, calling her a blind idiot. In response, the crowned one, still trembling, exclaimed that Rayla was simply oppressing her, taking advantage of her birth. Soon, the girl angrily turned to her brother, saying he was nothing more than an empty connection to her. She called him a useless dreamer and pointed her finger at him, as if erasing him from her life. The crowned head furiously ordered the younger one to be silent. The younger one, stunned by the scream, opened her eyes and instinctively retreated, unable to understand what she had done to deserve such hatred. At that moment, Astra stepped forward and intercepted the blow aimed at the crowned one. There was a clash of metal, and the attacker fell back, stunned, while the onlooking girl froze in amazement. The princess in the luxurious dress swung her hand with all her might, shouting a spell, but the other intercepted her blow and, smiling, exclaimed approvingly, as if this was just a warm-up before the real fight. Meanwhile, Reno was coldly considering whether to take the target alive and quietly asked his allies for their opinion. One of them noted with relief that their cannonballs were safe for now and sighed briefly. The young prince offered to cut off the thief's hands to stop the resistance, but those around him recoiled in horror. One of them quickly intervened, declaring they had not come to fight, and rushed forward, trying to prevent a massacre. The girl, noticing the flashing lights, screamed, and the one standing next to her, with a mischievous grin, replied that it was time to end the old feud, warning her brother to stay away if he valued his skin. The young woman in the crown, caught in the whirlpool of chaos, spun around and with a theatrical gesture declared capitulation, unable to withstand the intensity of what was happening. Reno frowned in displeasure, and the two girls exchanged confused glances. Then he calmly stated that he was completely surrounded, and one of them hesitantly asked if he really intended to surrender. The pink-haired girl wondered if they had given in too easily, but the short-haired girl, stroking her head, replied that it was better to give in with dignity than to lose the core in a humiliating fight. The girl then anxiously asked if he would become a demon lord if he surrendered. But he only smirked and called her a fool, explaining that those who are confident don't need confirmation of their actions. The girl in the crown calmly admitted she had never aspired to the throne and offered to keep everything as it had been after the match with Toka. The other hesitated, but then admitted she wanted to hold on to her core, even if it meant giving up her right of succession. The young aristocrat winced as the sharp sting left a mark on his arm, and the woman standing nearby expressed doubt about his intentions. Nevertheless, she agreed to a temporary truce, adding that after the mark, he would lose his claim anyway. Rayla asked if his core was safe, but he angrily refused to hand it over, knocking objects off the table. Lilith mockingly called him Hayo's dog and pointed out his fresh scar, which only angered him further. Then Rayla thoughtfully suggested that it would be better to avoid further confrontations, and the girl in the crown admitted that the end of the matter left a feeling of unease. The man merely quietly noted that not everything could be resolved with words. Suddenly, the girl turned to Renee for help, and he immediately agreed, but someone reminded him that he needed to cure the maids while the strange creature was biting them non-stop. The crowned head hesitated, suggesting that Hijui handle everything, but the man ordered Toka to keep an eye on him. She desperately begged him not to leave her alone, but the order was categorical. The girl in the tiara grinned and asked where the other girl's core had gone, to which the other girl turned pale, stumbling and addressing her with an uncertain "you," as if forgetting about rank. The crowned one sharply demanded an explanation, grabbing the slyly smiling young man by the collar. He answered evasively, while approaching footsteps echoed down the corridor, heightening the tension. Suddenly, the girl laughed, dismissing her opponent's words. The two women behind her exchanged puzzled glances when she confidently declared that she could give her core to anyone, even after surrender. Then someone asked if it had already been passed on to someone else, and the girl froze, her face reflecting a mixture of surprise and confusion. An uneasy pause hung in the air. Meanwhile, Lilith was humming carefree in the bathroom until a raven with a pendant in its beak knocked on the window. She extended her hand, and the bird took flight, splashing water across the room. The woman next to Hijui said incredulously that someone had dropped out of the competition early. She added that Hijui, as promised, had brought her something important. The little black rabbit with the bow tie watched as the girl felt as if mana was overflowing, filling her entire body from her fingertips to the top of her head, like a wave of living energy. Reynard pushed his way through the crowd of servants demanding that Lilith be brought immediately. She merely giggled cheerfully, taking her time, until the scene gave way to a view of the tall tower in Nosferatu, Salamisha's second domain. The girl said doubtfully, unsure if her older sister had absorbed her core. The two nearby giggled and asked who had even allowed it to be sent to Lilia without permission. Then one of them said their dream wasn't over yet, as their older sister would surely continue what they'd started. She revealed that during the battle for the throne, they'd sworn an oath to trust each other with the core in case of danger. The short-haired girl added that if one of them was on the brink of death, she would pass the core to the other so that she could complete their common task. Her interlocutor realized with surprise that this was a secret alliance. Meanwhile, the young man excitedly explained his plan to collect all 5 cores once his sister became a demon lord. The crowned one listened with fury, accusing him of greed and heading toward the castle. Soon 4 people appeared, one thanked them for waiting, another urged them to hurry before it was too late, and the other 2 nodded simultaneously, preparing for action. Lily entered with confidence and dignity, declaring that the bats that had accompanied them all this time were her long-lost younger sisters. The others looked at her with shock and disbelief, unable to believe the revelation. The woman greeted Hijui with a welcoming smile, acknowledging that she had obtained his core. At the same time, the man standing next to him felt the air compressed by the mana emanating from him, so powerful that his knees nearly buckled. The man then asked the woman what she intended to do with such power, but the other woman immediately accused him of bringing them here on purpose. The first calmly replied that she was now much closer to her dream and suggested getting rid of the bats that had brought him there. A woman with long, blonde hair declared that her desire was to wipe all women from the face of the earth. The younger woman, standing nearby, recoiled in horror, unable to believe such a mad plan. Then, her gaze shining with fanaticism, she declared that she would create an empire where she would be the only woman, a goddess in a harem worshipped by all. She embraced the crowned figure standing next to her, as if to cement her words. A decade before the start of the war for the throne, the princess joyfully announced the birth of a second prince, Hisui. The little boy smiled joyfully, declaring that he now had a younger brother, and clapped his hands. First Princess Lilia introduced herself softly, allowing herself to be addressed by the special title of Lilia-sama, causing the girl standing before her to freeze between admiration and embarrassment. She timidly tried to shorten the address to simply Lily, but the maid immediately tensed up, and the other, wearing a crown, irritably noted that such familiarity was unacceptable. The girl, trembling, confessed that she was happy to have a brother, but almost never saw the eldest prince. Behind the scenes, cheerful laughter and a voice reassured her that she was an important person in her own right. She then angrily described Hisui as a selfish and hot-tempered child, convinced he could get away with anything if he cried. Meanwhile, the boy, his cheeks puffed out, stamped his foot demonstratively. The princess angrily shouted at him, demanding that he call her Ine-sama, and the maids whispered to each other that he was behaving exactly like she had done as a child. Later, the girl heard a knock on the door and became wary, looking at the window, beyond which hung a gloomy crescent moon. The night's silence seemed unsettling and thick, like fog. The frightened little girl asked her sister Lil to let her sleep next to her, but she rudely ordered her to leave. Then the girl whispered that she was afraid her brother would come and kill her. Lil snorted, calling her cunning, but admitted that she felt uneasy herself. Lilith, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, said they would have to fight if they wanted to become the next rulers. Her interlocutor, trembling, called it a terrifying thought and wondered what she was even doing there. A little while later, they lay down next to each other, and Lilith calmly said that only the demon lord could live freely, while the rest were doomed to struggle. In response, the other admitted that he feared this battle and did not want to be ruler. Then she smiled softly and suggested joining forces. There was warmth in her voice, and the man lying next to her quietly brushed away a tear, feeling hope for the first time. Under the starry sky, one of them thought it would be harder to lose together and vowed to live until the dream came true. Up close, their hands intertwined, and their eyes sparkled with determination to protect each other. A bird flew past the window, heralding the start of a new day. Two girls in crowns exchanged words about growing up and promised not to cry anymore, smiling with a hint of irony. In the dark room, Reino and Lilith calmly discussed their plan, confident of success. Reino sounded decisive, and Lilith, containing her excitement, nodded respectfully. When Rayla overheard the conversation about the harem, she and the two girls standing nearby simultaneously recoiled, exchanging glances. Laughter echoed in the distance, lending an almost frantic quality to the scene. Meanwhile, Celeste, smiling dreamily, confessed that she'd always wanted her own harem, men willing to obey her every desire. It was her most intimate confession, uttered almost with rapture. One of the girls accused Lilia of being obsessed with men and selfishly using magic, calling her behavior perverted. Another, shocked, recalled that Lilia had always been a bit strange and wondered if that was why she intended to destroy all women. Then the confident woman declared that everyone present deserved punishment. One embarrassed man admitted he didn't know how to handle such women, and the others, rolling their eyes, called two of them hopeless succubi and ordered them to stop their madness. A girl with long hair and a crown cracked her whip, accusing the others of mocking Hisui. Then the heel of her shoe struck the marble, and the air seemed to tremble with tension. Rayla, trembling, feared reprisal, and Lilith, clutching her whip and demanding that someone step forward, looked terrifying. The others exchanged glances, unsure whether her mana had strengthened or whether she was simply overcome with rage. Celeste suddenly accused Reynard and his companions of orchestrating the entire situation and luring them into a trap. After these words, she grabbed someone's hand, squeezing her fingers until they hurt. At that moment, Astra appeared among the scattering of roses and shining sparks, seeming calm and a little surprised, and Rayla looked out from behind the flower petals in fear, not daring to intervene. The girl staggered toward the confident young man and, with trembling hands, grabbed him by the collar, demanding his name. He coldly advised her not to give out her name to strangers so carelessly. With a beaming smile, she happily declared her attraction to Ernest and offered to become her personal servant. The two men standing nearby exchanged glances, unsure if they were serious, and noted with surprise her sudden boldness. Lilith mockingly remarked that he was wasting his energy looking after Hayo, but he, cupping her face in his hand, firmly replied that he had no intention of abandoning his duty. She, however, had a coquettish glint in her eyes, as if toying with his composure. Then Rayla confidently said that caring for Hayo was natural. After all, someone had to do it. Lilith hugged her, promising to look after her, though she admitted she considered it a waste of energy. The cat-eared woman mockingly warned the man to change sides before it was too late, while he held tightly to the golden-eyed girl, who blushed and looked away. Celeste, beaming with joy, declared that she usually kills people because of their weakness, but she trusts heroes, for, in her opinion, love transcends all differences. She urged everyone to stop worrying and simply enjoy the feelings. Rayla calmly added that relationships should be without distinction by race or species, but the small figure nearby reminded her of torture, causing the others to anxiously seek agreement on at least this. Lilith offered a lucrative deal, promising love in exchange for loyal service, assuring him that with her he wouldn't have to worry about food or money. The young man frowned silently, expressing irritation and weariness. He politely declined the queen's offer, explaining that he had business of his own to attend to. She sighed with mild disappointment, and the girl standing nearby breathed a sigh of relief. At that moment, René delivered a powerful kick, knocking his opponent to the ground. He cried out in pain, and a girl watching nearby screamed his name in panic. Reino, barely able to stand after the fight, scooped Lilith up, noting that she didn't seem to be giving up. His gaze mingled weariness and admiration for her stubbornness. She said with a hint of mockery that although he looked weak, he was resilient, and asked if he was angry that the woman had pinned him down. He blushed but chose to remain silent. Lilith leaned closer, whispering that she was a spoiled brat and wouldn't rest until she got what she wanted. Her voice held a level of brazenness comparable to Hijui's. A woman with long hair and sharp nails leaned toward the man and, with a predatory smile, declared that she would give him a special love bite. He felt a chill run through his body, and his heart began to beat faster. Suddenly, Astra sank her teeth into someone's neck, causing the victim to cry out in surprise. Two nearby girls screamed, begging her to stop, fearing that such a move could lead to disaster. The girl winced painfully, and someone watching noticed she was activating her special ability. An unpleasant, wet sound echoed through the room, heightening the tension. Ernest, gasping for breath, tried to break free, but Lilith, with a sinister smile, pressed him to her. Someone in the shadows explained that her technique was called Lilith's Kiss and, laughing, added that there was no escape from it. Someone explained that, unlike the royal mark of submission, the special seal only affects men, depriving them of their will and turning them into submissive puppets serving one mistress. The girl desperately shouted at René not to succumb to the spell, but the other, looking at his swaying figure, asked in horror if it was really him. The young man stepped forward, as if drawn by an invisible force. The confident woman ordered the man to kneel and kiss her hand, calling him her knight and her doll. He frowned and covered his face, barely containing his irritation. Then he forcefully pushed her hand away, declaring that no was no, and struggled to catch his breath. Two girls nearby noticed the blood and exchanged worried glances, realizing he'd been hurt in self-defense. The pink-haired woman, dramatically tossing her head, complained that her fangs were useless, as no man had ever resisted their enchanting power before. The others merely glanced at each other, unsure whether to sympathize or laugh. Then one of the girls rushed to her fallen sister, who lay unconscious in the boy's arms. Two onlookers commented that the boy was ruthless, and that love, as always, blinded the mind. The girl angrily accused the young man of being obsessed with her sister, calling him a pervert. Another quickly warned him not to lose control, as any unnecessary movement could lead to disaster. Rayla, irritated and embarrassed, lashed out at Toka, berating herself for being overly cautious. Nearby, a confident woman dismissively declared that even with two cores, they had nothing to fear. The crowned head sharply declared that she was in a foul mood and could not understand how such an ignorant, stupid girl dared to speak to her, reminding her that she had once begged her sister for mercy. Lilith stepped forward, warning that some people should know their place. The girl in the maid uniform squealed in fear, clutching her hands to her chest. Someone bit down sharply, but immediately recoiled when the opponent coldly called her blood disgusting and unripe, adding that it was not worth entering into a fight in which there was no chance of victory. The short-haired girl insisted she was fine, despite the bite on her neck, while her friend with the bow whispered fearfully that she might have gone crazy. The two royals, standing off to the side, merely exchanged glances, commenting on the friendly game. Suddenly, someone noticed a red rose-shaped mark on Hayo's arm and asked in surprise where it came from. The other two explained that it was a sign of their sister's ability, causing confusion and alarm among everyone. In the foreground, a girl is agonizingly struggling with something within herself, while a stunned man stands behind her. The young man is then shown gritting his teeth, ordering himself to pull himself together, while a girl nearby indignantly asks why she wasn't told anything. The girl cautiously approached the other, who sat motionless with a distorted hand and a dark aura. The two figures behind her realized she was under someone's control, and the seated one grinned, radiating predatory satisfaction. The controlling figure then joyfully declared that it could control the alien mark and destroy it at any moment. The man nearby watched silently, contemplating how dangerous the situation had become. Meanwhile, another girl was sobbing, locked in a fireproof cage, and a calm young man outside wearily asked if things had really come to this. Through her tears, she insisted that her fire magic would work, as such cages were only supposed to withstand normal heat. The girl angrily accused the captive of losing her composure, and the kneeling man calmly explained that she simply could not use magic, which is why her core had not been removed. Then Rayla suggested breaking the bars and breaking out, but her frightened companion whispered that escaping could lead to slavery or death. A third one insistently warned them to keep quiet. Guards were nearby. The curly-haired girl admitted she was afraid of endangering others, while the man in the dark uniform considered a quiet escape but was unsure how to save Hayo. Meanwhile, the twin with ponytails asked a difficult question: is it permissible to destroy all demons for the sake of freedom? Rayla, clenching her fists, scolded them, declaring that they were only good at slaughter, and that their true duty was to save the princess. One of her companions turned away in irritation, unable to find the words to retort. In silence, she admitted that she regretted not giving up like her brother, when she could have simply killed her enemies in their sleep. Reino quietly asked if the succubus's bite still hurt, reminding her of how she had once been obsessed with it. Then Lilith, with a cheeky smile, proposed a crazy plan, to get closer to their goal at any cost. The two watched from the sidelines, whispering that Hayo looked so much cuter when she was silent, like a soulless doll. A woman with long hair, examining the captive, coldly remarked that ruby eyes and a garnet brooch would suit her for added beauty. The second woman added indifferently that after death, she could be stuffed. Suddenly, there was a knock, and one of the girls burst into laughter, inviting them in. A man hesitantly entered the room, and the woman sitting on the sofa explained that the captured man insisted on meeting despite his strange behavior. The princess and her retinue froze as a confident young man stepped forward and calmly addressed her by name, Lily. His voice was filled with unwavering confidence. Then he dropped to one knee, took the blonde's hand, and with genuine seriousness asked permission to become her servant. She blushed and looked away, unable to hide a slight blush.